And the moderator doc is still the moderator responsibilities one that we were using the other day, right? Okay, cool.
Excellent. Looks like I'm host again, and we are streaming on YouTube. Fantastic.
I just tried to join the event from the Action Network, like auto RSVP, and the link
Heyo.
off. Or like it wasn't loading up. Are there folks in the waiting room already? Like, do we know if it's working normally?
There are people coming into the waiting room and being admitted right now.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I had to copy and paste it. It wouldn't just click from the link, but it did seem right.
Okay.
Hey, does that look normal to everyone?
Looks good.
Okay, great. I was gonna. Does everyone want me to play music? I figured out how to do that, or do we care?
I like a little music personally. I think it helps create good energy and less awkwardness in the intro.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're gonna give people a few minutes to get behind it.
What? He was in this other room.
Ew, bro, what are you doing?
Oh, I think you're not on mute.
Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. Give me 1 second.
Adam, what's your song?
I found I found some random Zoom waiting room music on YouTube. It's like piano stuff. Okay. I think it'll be fine. Hopefully.
Lo-fi chill hip hop beats. To say to.
People coming in now, so If you want to introduce yourself in the chat, please feel free to go ahead and do that. If you want to share your name and pronouns and what part of the DMV you're from, that would be great. We'll get started in a few minutes. Also, just a note to everybody that the presentation today is going to be recorded. Currently streaming on YouTube and Facebook, so if you don't want your picture or name out there in the description or Thanks for coming, everybody. We're going to get started in maybe about 2 or 3 minutes. Just to allow everybody time to get signed in. If you want to introduce yourself in the chat and tell us your pronouns and what part of the DMV you're from, maybe a little bit about what brought you here today, and we'll get started in a few minutes. Okay, we've still got a few people trickling in, but I think maybe we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming tonight. My name is Kate. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm an organizer with We Power DC. We're going to talk tonight about energy justice in the district. We are really excited to share our campaign goals for 2021 with you and hear from our speakers about how these issues impact our community. First, while our meeting today is taking place in digital space, the issues of energy justice we're discussing here today are playing out on stolen land. As environmental activists, it's important for us to acknowledge the history of settler colonialism that has both displaced DC's indigenous people and continues to degrade our relationship to the land. Most of DC is located on Piscataway land, and I am currently on occupied Nacotchtank land. The Nacotchtank were part of the Piscataway chiefdom, and their village was the largest of 3 native villages located in this area. We're going to drop a link in the chat to a website called Native Lands. Please take some time to familiarize yourself with the pre-colonial history of the land that you are occupying. Okay. So I'm going to quickly go over the agenda for today. I'm going to give you guys a brief introduction to We Power DC's work and what we've been up to over the past year. We're going to talk a little bit about what public power means and some of the energy justice issues facing DC. Then I'm going to turn it over to another of our organizers, and Abby is going to give us a more detailed look at our 4 demands and introduce our speakers. We are going to have a Q&A at the end of the presentation, so if you want to drop questions in the chat, you can do that at any time during the presentation, and then we're going to collect them and answer them at the end. Okay, so a little bit about who we are. We Power DC is a coalition of community members and organizations fighting for public power in the district. We began in 2019 as the No Pepco Pledge. Our campaign then was focused on pressuring DC Council candidates to reject money from Pepco and support legislation on public power in the district. We successfully signed on 7 candidates to our pledge to reject Pepco's donations. And in 2020, 3 of our No Pepco Pledge signers won their elections: Janice Lewis-George, Brooke Pinto, and Christina Henderson. As the DC Council campaign season drew to a close, we reformed as We Power DC and shifted our focus to issues of energy democracy and energy justice in the district. We believe that investor-owned utilities like Pepco harm our communities with their high rates, legacy of pollution, and low pay. Over the spring and fall of 2020, Pepco filed for a rate increase with its regulatory body, the Public Services Commission. That rate increase could end up resulting in residents' energy bills going up over $100 in the first year alone. In addition to increasing district residents' utility costs, the rate increase would not do anything to advance DC's clean energy goals. In response to Pepco's attempt to raise rates, We Power DC worked hard to mobilize community resistance to the rate case. Over 100 residents testified at the September hearing at the PSC, which is a very unusually high turnout for Pepco's regulatory body. And over 250 residents used our toolkit to submit testimony to the PSC, demanding that they reject Pepco's rate hike. While they were filing to increase rates in the fall, it's important to remember that Pepco reported $220 million in profit just in the third quarter of 2020 alone. By this time, DC residents had already been struggling for 6 months with an historic public health crisis and the economic devastation of pandemic-related job losses and instability. In December, Pepco and its allies on the city council tried to lift the temporary protections put in place to keep us safe, including the ban on utility shutoffs. DC residents are counting on those protections as many of us are staying home more often and working and attending school online during the pandemic. It's not an accident or coincidence that Pepco raises our rates continuously or fights against protections for the most vulnerable DC residents. Investor-owned utilities exist to make profit and enrich their shareholders. You can see from our graphic here that investor-owned utilities use the profit that they make from our electric bills to corrupt our political process and influence regulatory institutions like the PSC. They use our money to enrich their friends in the fossil fuel industry by funding dirty power plants, pipelines, and fracked gas wells. And they resist and obstruct the deployment of clean energy like solar and wind, and are slow walking the very overdue transition to renewable energy resources. We need a better alternative that serves people over corporate profits. We cannot allow investor-owned utilities like Pepco to raise our rates, pollute our communities, and resist DC's decarbonization efforts, all for the sake of shareholder dividends. Pepco can't be reformed, so it has to be replaced. We Power DC believes that a publicly owned utility directly accountable to the people it serves is the only way to achieve energy democracy. Hundreds of publicly owned utilities already exist across the country, from big cities like Los Angeles to the entire state of Nebraska. A publicly owned utility in DC could be more directly controlled by the residents themselves, which would ensure that its energy is clean, its rates are affordable, and its policies are equitable. So what are some of the benefits of a publicly owned utility? Public power lowers energy bills. Across the country, public power customers pay 11% less per year and save the average household about $177 per year. And in some places, the difference is even larger than the average. You can see from our graph that we have on the slide here that the rates for investor-owned PG&E are much higher compared to public utilities in Sacramento and Silicon Valley in California. Public power strengthens our communities. Public utilities tend to reinvest 33% more of their revenues into the communities that they serve. Public power also helps decarbonize our energy system. All of the utilities that get 100% of their energy from renewable sources are publicly owned. However, our fight for public power is a long-term one, and DC residents are struggling now. So as we work towards building a new system centered around power for the people, we have an opportunity to fight for more equitable and just policies within our existing system. So for 2021, We Power DC will be concentrating its efforts on issues of energy justice within the district. Our first speakers tonight are from the Office of the People's Counsel, and they're here to say a few words about their work fighting for DC residents struggling with shutoffs and utility debt during the pandemic. Please welcome Anjali Patel, the Senior Assistant People's Counsel, and Adrienne Mouton Henderson, Assistant People's Counsel at the OPC.
Good evening. Thank you guys so much for having us. And also thank you so much for your mobilization during the PEPCO rate case. It was very instrumental in getting a lot of public support. So we definitely want to say thank you. It is also nice to be asked to come out just to share our mission of what we do at OPC. As you said, Anjali Patel is also online. We sent over some slides. We're going to cover the first, I'm going to cover the first two, and Ms. Patel is going to take up the next two after that. So some general considerations with the Office of the People Counsel that we do is that we look at utility service as an essential service. It also is we provide this, make sure that the service and the rates are just and reasonable. And in every single rate case, we use those principles in every simple application that goes before the Public Service Commission, as we are statutorily mandated to protect district ratepayers. We, unlike other public service commissions, we have a kind of a monopoly with PEPCO, so we're in a disadvantage, but at the same time, we do our best to ensure that rates remain just and reasonable. OPC's statutory mandate is to consider the public safety, the economy of the District of Columbia, and the conservation of natural resources, the preservation of the environmental quality, including effects of global climate change, and the district's public climate commitments, as found in DC Code 34804E. Additionally, we also look at other things during rate cases. And the overview of OPC is that are my slides up by any chance? I don't know who's controlling those. Is that Adam? Thank you. I'm on slide 2. Thank you. So by law, OPC is the statutory advocate for consumers of regulatory service. I'll just keep going. There, thank you. Okay, and the natural gas service is provided, of course, by Washington Gas Light Company. There was a merger that occurred some time ago, and now they're owned by a Canadian company known as AltaGas. The electric service provider, of course, is PEPCO, and they are owned by Exelon Corporation. That merger occurred a few years back, and they had their first rate case, which was the MRP that we recently had. They had another one before that was merged, and we did not see those rates after the merger, which was the Tax Cut Job Acts. And so here we are 5 years later post-merger, and we've had the first true rate case that could possibly result in significant rate increase for consumers in the district. We also participate in water service cases, and that's DC Water. We have a separate section at our office that handles complaints. And we also do telephone service for Verizon and regulated landline service. OPC has a three-pronged mission. We advocate, we educate, and we protect. Anjali and I both work in the legal litigation section there at the office. I also work in the energy efficiency sustainability section, which focuses on the climate goals for the district. And I sit on several boards, including the Pilot Projects and Governance Board, and I'll get into that later. We just want to note that our remarks tonight are provided for educational purposes only, and they do not reflect the policy or positions of our office or the People's Council Sandra Madhavu-Fry. And I'll turn it over to Ms. Patel.
We can't hear you.
Adi, turn it off, babe.
Is that working or still not?
Good.
Now we can hear you.
That's good.
Yep.
Okay, good. So we're going to go one slide forward to the one that says overview of energy justice. Thank you. So energy justice has a multi-dimensional nature. There's multiple different aspects to what we consider to be energy justice. The best explanation that we found for this is from the Initiative for Energy Justice, which breaks it down into 4 different components. The first is energy burden, which are energy expenses relative to the household income. So if you have a greater energy burden, that means a greater amount of your household, a greater ratio of your household expenses are going to pay for utility service. In DC, the energy burden is quite high, especially for low and moderate income households. Energy security is your ability to pay for energy bills. So these are things that we're facing, especially with the pandemic, about people who are strapped for cash and can't pay their full bills. Energy poverty relates to whether you have access to energy. So are you able to get service? Are you able to get reliable service? And energy democracy is what is the consumer's role in shaping their own energy future? Do they have an active role or do they not have an active role or a more passive role? So OPC has different initiatives that address all 4 of these aspects of energy justice, and we're just going to cover a couple of them tonight. If we could go to the next slide, please. So as I said, affordability has been an ongoing issue in the district. It's one of our key concerns and has been a key concern of our office ever since its inception. It's actually one of the reasons our office was created. Electric bills were skyrocketing and they wanted to make sure consumers were represented when it came to setting electric rates. So this issue has come to the forefront even more though during the pandemic, where we have folks who their employment has been threatened, their health has been threatened, and the ability to pay bills has become harder and harder. So in our general work, we address affordability through distribution rate cases, which we came to speak to you about last year. And as Adrian said, you guys did a great job about bringing folks out to give the consumer point of view on Pepco's rate increase request. We also participate actively at PJM and FERC in order to address transmission and generation costs. And in the spring, we're going to be issuing an energy affordability study that OPC partnered with a nonprofit research institute called Apprise to put together. The affordability study will inform and advise on matters affecting energy affordability, and it will provide detailed information about low and moderate income households in the district. So hopefully when that comes out, we can send you guys a copy. You can see, what about program design and program elements and things that we need to support those who are energy burdened in the district. And arrearages is the other big issue that we've been tackling this year, especially given that many people who normally could pay bills are not able to. Right now, there's currently about 110,000 customers in arrears. That's electric, gas, and water customers total. About 98,000 of those are electric and gas customers. So As was mentioned before, we do have a moratorium in place that is tied to the public health emergency. There was some movement, especially by the chairman of the council, to lift that moratorium in December. And I know WePower was instrumental in making sure that that did not get lifted. There is now discussions again to lift the moratorium, and they're supposed to be presenting a bill on Tuesday. So if you can speak up now, that would be great. OPC has been advocating that the moratorium shouldn't be lifted during the pendency of the health crisis, to at least keep it in line with how long the health emergency is in place. One important thing we did want to note is that the utility shareholders are not the ones that pay for utility debt. That actually is placed on stakeholders. So there's two ways that utilities usually get those costs, either through rate cases, there's a general amount of debt that utilities incur on a reasonable amount of debt that utilities generally incur, and that is wrapped into a rate case. The Public Service Commission has also authorized PEPCO and WGL to track debt costs related to COVID-19, and they may be able to get a separate recovery of those costs that will be reviewed at a later date, but they are tracking COVID-19 debt costs. So if these costs all of those costs are paid by ratepayers, not by the shareholders. And I'm going to turn it back over to Adrian for our last slide.
Adrian, you're on mute.
So energy poverty and energy democracy is one of those very important topics that we've been focusing on, especially during the pandemic. And ensuring service is safe and reliable in all 8 wards has become very paramount, especially during these ice storms that we've been having. I won't even call them snowstorms here in DC. We've gotten some dust of snow, but we've gotten more ice. And that has caused problems in a lot of the wards that have typically experienced a lot of outages, specifically in wards 4, 5, 7, and 8. Even though Ward 4 is split up and has a lot of multifamily dwellings, there are a lot of homeowners that experience outages as well. And so it's also on the fringe of Ward 3. And so we've had a lot of calls about different things, and particularly with reliability of service. So those things have come up, especially during the pandemic, with a lot of things that have been occurring. Also, the amount of people who are now residentially at home. So your residential service bills have probably gone up if you've seen the increases. I know I, as a DC resident, have seen the extreme uptick in my bills, having my entire family home, working, using Wi-Fi and various, electric service and gas. So we've all seen the bills go up. And as those bills continue to go up, and as the new model of what it's going to be for us to work from home, which seems like that's going to be the new model going forward, at least for the foreseeable future, we want to ensure that our service is safe and reliable, but also that our rates remain just and reasonable. So part of that is also having choice. And so in our working groups that I've been particularly heading up and leading up from the office, I was the lead attorney on grid modernization, which is known as Power Path Forward. It previously was modernizing the energy delivery system for improved sustainability, and that was known as MEDSIS. And that was extremely important in us trying to move forward and trying to get more distributed energy resources in the district. So the amount of energy efficiency that we have going on, I would say by the end of the spring, you're going to see the utility companies reaching out to you to see if you would like to put energy efficiency measures in your homes and in the apartment buildings that you reside in, because there's a big push to put more of those measures on the system. Part of that is also going to be if we're using distributed energy in order to get a cheaper rate for those energy efficiency measures. A lot of the working groups are working in and to ensure that they have LMI, which is low to moderate income individuals, also be able to have those measures, is that we're setting aside 30% of those program costs and opportunities in that portfolio to go towards LMI customers. And part of that is because they bear most of the energy burden when it comes to individuals who use a lot of energy, especially in our multifamily low income dwellings. So the last bullet is just about full representation to respect to the changes in the energy market. We have several dockets going on at FERC that Anjali spoke about. Part of those are your MOPR dockets, your storage dockets. We're very involved in those. We have an incredibly great staff on the legal side, I can definitely tout about, but overall we have a really great staff period, but especially in our legal department who works extremely hard at PJM and FERC to ensure that we're really up to date on a market analysis and what's going on. You know, and being involved at FERC is extremely important because those rules do trickle down to PJM, and PJM trickles down to what we do on the SOS market. 80% of our customers that are on the PEPCO system are SOS customers, and that is the default service provider. It's extremely important that we, as your consumer advocate, are very involved at FERC to ensure that whatever rules trickle down, that transpire to come down to the Public Service Commission, that we understand what's going on. So if there are any of the formal cases that you guys would like to talk about offline, please reach out to us. We're more than happy to bring you up to speed about those cases. And it's going to be extremely important that in the spring, when those utilities do go up, and I'm sorry, I was looking at a chat from Laura Levinson. So if there's anything that you guys want to discuss offline, please let us know. We're on several boards. I mentioned the Pilot Projects Governance Board. I sit as the secretary on that, and that's going to be instrumental with the merger funds that's going to come forward in order for us to have pilot projects that are going to have DER projects all over the city in the next 2 to 3 years. So please reach out to us if you have any questions offline. And if there's anything that you guys need further information on, we're more than here. We're here as an asset for you guys to utilize, and that's what we do. So thanks so much for having us this evening.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Anjali and Adrienne, and thanks for everyone's patience as we work through some of these technical difficulties. Feel free to put any questions for them in the chat. They unfortunately can't stay for the Q&A, but we'll make sure they get your questions. We'll also have a few more speakers throughout, but we'll stay for the Q&A so you can ask your questions then. Hi, everyone. My name is Abby. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm an organizer with We Power DC. I'm speaking to you today from Ward 5 in DC, also known as Occupied Piscataway Land. And I want to echo Kate's thanks for joining us today. I'm here to talk more about We Power DC's vision of energy justice in the district, why energy justice is so important, and how we'll achieve it through our new energy justice campaign. Given the situation that Anjali and Adrienne just outlined, access to affordable energy in DC is more important now than ever, especially considering the situation in Texas right now. Fighting for energy justice provides benefits to people in need today. While we build the political power required to transform PEPCO into a publicly controlled utility, we also have to address the barbaric things that PEPCO is doing in our communities right now. By fighting for urgent energy justice priorities that will affect the most marginalized in DC today, we can change the conversation around our current power structure and shape the vision and policy for a better energy system. We demand that the DC Council enact a permanent ban on utility shutoffs and unjust utility fees, that PEPCO forgive all existing utility debt without passing the costs on to ratepayers, that PEPCO pay all contractors union wages and provide them with health insurance, and that the DC government invests significantly more in household solar installations, community solar, and electrification for renters and low-income neighborhoods. I'll go into more detail about each of our energy justice goals now. Energy is a human right. No one should go without it, especially in the midst of a massive health, economic, and climate crisis. The DC government established a temporary moratorium on utility shutoffs in response to the COVID crisis. But as Kate mentioned earlier, Council Chairman Mendelson has already attempted to lift it even as the pandemic worsened. Luckily, the proposal was defeated, but the fact that it was even considered at all is unacceptable. And beyond the COVID crisis, utility shutoffs are a barbaric and unjustifiable practice that regularly put people's lives at risk. Unjust utility fees, like those imposed for disconnection and reconnection to the grid, further compound energy inequality. It's possible for utilities to operate and remain profitable without them. Multiple states in the Northeast have seasonal bans on electricity shutoffs, and New York City has a ban on water shutoffs, and all those utilities still operate effectively. Furthermore, researchers estimate that an emergency national utility shutoff moratorium in place from March to November 2020 resulted in 14.8% fewer COVID deaths. DC residents deserve energy, especially during freezing winter temperatures, and especially when evidence shows that energy access helps protect people from dying in a deadly pandemic. We demand that the DC Council establish a permanent ban on utility shutoffs and unjust utility fees, such as those imposed for disconnection or reconnection to the grid. Now I'd like to welcome Shakira Mingo, the resource organizer with our coalition partner, 1DC. 1DC is a grassroots community organizing collective based in Shaw, working to create and preserve racial and economic equity in the district. Shakira is here to talk to us about 1DC's Right to Housing campaign and why utility shutoff bans and debt forgiveness matter in the fight for housing justice. Take it away, Shakira.
Thank you, Abby, for the wonderful introduction. It's an honor and pleasure to be here. Hey, everyone. As she mentioned, my name is Shakira Mingo. I am the resource organizer with 1DC, and I am here to talk about our Cancel Rent campaign. So we have been working since April after when the pandemic happened to cancel rent for people that have been negatively impacted by COVID. So what we mean by that is for during this time, people have lost wages and we do not want them to owe. So for tenants that have accrued debt for this time, we want that canceled so that people will not be able to face eviction due to non-payment of rent in this pandemic, and tenants will not owe fees for any missed payments. And we're also fighting for demanding that landlords cannot report non-payment to credit and reporting agencies. Our plan is to help landlords and through helping them receive funds for missed payments. So during this time, as you guys know, that rent and utilities, if you can't pay your rent, you can't pay your utilities. If your utilities are cut off, it's like being evicted because you can't even use anything in your home. So we are looking for foot soldiers to join us in this battle. We need to build the people power to get this movement up and going. As you guys heard, Phil Mendelssohn is already trying to stop this, trying to stop the current emergency thing that we have in place. We can't do that. This is not a black-white issue. This is a people issue. This is a basic human right. People during this time need to be able to stay in their homes. People also during this time need to have their utilities. It's like they tell us during this time in order for us to be able to get the COVID numbers down, we have to stay at home, stay in place, stay shelter in place. But yet they're trying to take people's shelters away. That doesn't make sense. So during this time, I just want to let y'all know that your silence will not protect you. Your silence will not help you stay in your homes, and your silence will not keep your utilities on. So we need people, we need everybody on this call. It is 95 participants on this call. We need everybody, we need you guys to help us build the power so they can cancel rent in DC and stop playing with us, and also cancel the utilities as well. So if you're interested in joining us, you can join 1DC. We also are part of the Cancel Rent Coalition with 12 organizations. We are throwing down. If you don't want to be a foot soldier, that's fine. You can donate to the movement. You can follow us on social media. There are a lot of ways that you can participate. Again, your silence will not protect you during this time. We need 95 plus of y'all to start speaking up so that we can make this happen. This is a people movement. We already know these politicians they're not going to do their jobs. We got to make them do their jobs. And we got to stand together in solidarity. You don't have to like me because of the color of my skin, but we all know that we all need to be able to stay in our homes during this time. That's one thing we can't agree on. During this time, people need to stay in their homes. Having a home during this time is a basic human right, period. And we need to make sure that people are able to stay in their homes during this time. So again, if y'all want to join, the link is in the chat. Join 1DC. If you're down to join the Cancel Rent Coalition with the 12 organizations that's throwing down, let me know. I'm staying on. If y'all have any questions that y'all need to get answered, that's fine as well. I'll be here for the Q&A. If you want to know our social media handles, I can drop those in the chat to get involved with us during this time and stand in solidarity with us. You can tweet us, at us, donate, show up. Like we need people to join this movement. We need foot soldiers. We are a warhead, and we need y'all to build the power so we can cancel rent and utilities in DC. So thank you, and I look forward to seeing y'all on the battlefield. And I'm passing it back to you, Abby.
Wow. Thanks so much, Shakira, for those powerful words. We need to do all of that and more. As Shakira said, feel free to put questions for her in the chat and she'll answer them at the end. And we know that a permanent moratorium on utility shutoffs and a ban on unjust utility fees, as well as canceling rent, are essential to achieving energy access for all. But we cannot achieve an energy system that works for everyone without a cancellation of utility debt as well, like Shakira said. The DC Public Service Commission is supposed to ensure that our utilities offer services at reasonable rates for DC residents. Instead, we get an endless series of rate hikes while PEPCO's profits increase every year. Tens of thousands of DC residents are now indebted to our highly profitable investor-owned energy utilities, living in fear of shutoffs and eviction. As of December 2020, almost 100,000 DC residents owed over $40 million in debt to PEPCO and Washington Gas, with over 70,000 customers in debt to PEPCO alone. 10,000 more residents owe money to PEPCO today than at this time last year, while the total dollar value of the debt has more than doubled. Just under 1/4 of PEPCO's ratepayers can't pay their utility bills, including 84% of PEPCO's low-income customers. I'll say that again. Just under 1/4 of PEPCO's ratepayers can't pay their utility bills, including 84% of PEPCO's low-income customers. If this happened in any other industry, the company would go out of business or be replaced by a competitor. Yet because of our unjust corporate monopoly system, PEPCO continues to file for rate increases, increasing prices and pushing even more residents into debt. However, the DC Council has the ability to get rid of this debt. And with their $220 million in profits from the third quarter of 2020 alone, PEPCO has the ability to pay. A bill was just introduced in the Massachusetts legislature to forgive residents' utility debt, in which the government will pay customers' debt accrued from March 2020 using a relief fund funded from proceeds from a polluter's fee placed on utility companies. The bill also has provisions that fees can't be passed on to consumers and sets up a structure for just debt repayment plans in the future. We can do something like this in DC too. We demand that PEPCO forgive all existing utility debt without passing the costs on to other ratepayers. Utility shutoffs, fees, and debt are intimately connected to economic justice. Energy for all can't come at the expense of the workers building and maintaining our energy infrastructure. Utility workers are the foundation of the clean energy transition, and all utility jobs should allow working people to prosper. Right now, though, this is not the case. Investor-owned utilities like PEPCO regularly underpay and withhold benefits from their contractors, while at the same time deploying those contractors to undermine unionized workers. And in 2019, 22% of PEPCO's contracted workforce earned less than the legal minimum wage in DC, while 59% weren't provided health insurance. PEPCO won't pay their contractors a living wage, but their executives make an average of $3 million per year. PEPCO's contractors are critical to making sure our lights stay on and our heat works, and they are more essential now than ever as the winter weather drags on and we continue to stay inside to keep safe. Regardless of the season or the health crisis, though, no one should be denied the wages needed to pay their own utility bills as they maintain the energy infrastructure for thousands of others. We demand that PEPCO pay all contractors union wages and provide them with health insurance. Now I'd like to welcome Maeva Lohr, an energy researcher with the Laborers International Union of North America, or LIUNA. LIUNA represents construction and energy workers, as well as public employees across the United States and Canada, and is fighting for family supporting wages for their workers. Maeva is here to talk to us about LIUNA's prevailing wage campaign and why energy justice includes good union jobs for utility workers. Take it away, Maeva.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Mava Lower. I work with laborers. I have 5 minutes, so I will be brief. So the laborers represent about 500,000 construction workers in the United States. We've been building public infrastructure and utility infrastructure for over a century. In the district, the local that services this area is Local 11. They're in Ward 5. They have about 3,000 members, 800 of whom do utility construction work. So just to be clear, we don't represent like the in-house workers, but there are thousands of contracted out construction workers employed by both the investor-owned utilities and DC Water. So many of you have probably passed a utility construction site in DC. You'll notice oftentimes that they're either undergrounding, either like an electric or distribution transmission line, or they're rehabilitating a natural gas or water pipeline. For the most part, 3 out of 4 of those workers will be laborers. So, when folks think about, utility work, they think about electricians, and the electricians are core to utility operations. However, there's been a trend over the last few decades where more and more of more specialized work, like construction work, is being contracted out. And the result has been a deterioration of labor standards, which I can go into later. I'm not going to go into what actual, this sort of sample job description, but what I wanted to do was just give folks kind of an idea of the scope of work for utility labor. So the first thing I'll say is that this is really dangerous work. There's a lot of worker safety and health risk. For example, there's a lot of risks related to trench collapse, right? And so, for example, a transmission line in DC is buried 15 feet underground, right? Not every person will want to climb into a trench like that. And, there's a lot of shoring, there's a lot of safety kind of requirements, construction standards to protect these workers. But unfortunately, dying in a collapsed trench or being injured in a collapsed trench is one of the most common avoidable injuries you can have at work. And so this is really dangerous work. The second thing is that, this is actually really skilled work, right? And so you can't just be a guy and put on a pair of boots and get in the middle of the street, so you have to be trained to do this work. And so if you're working in the gas side, you need to be operator qualified to do this work. You have to be certified. The electric side, there's not those same requirements, but there's a lot of training that goes into being able to be a construction laborer. And then the last thing is that this is really physically demanding work, right? And so 0 degrees or 100 degrees, people are out in the street. It's dangerous to be out in the street. That's actually the primary safety risk for these workers in DC. Distracted drivers, hitting workers. It happens all the time, and it's really sad and unfortunate. So we can go to slide 2, please. So what do you think? And I'm sorry, this is not totally clear. But what do you think these workers are actually paid, right? So it's dangerous work, it's skilled work, and it's physically demanding work. So we talk to workers every day. Our organizers go out and talk to workers every day. And this is a profile of like 6 workers that we talked to on one day before the pandemic. We're still out talking to workers, and we have more updated profiles. But I wanted to include this one because we actually gave this to the commission. We gave this to the DC Public Service Commission. And there are these 6 workers that we talked to. And they were all being paid $13 an hour. No wait, no benefits, no health insurance, definitely no retirement benefits. It's important to know that at that time, the DC minimum wage was $14 an hour, right? And so one of the things about construction is that the business model, is kind of tends toward lower wages because turnover is so rapid. We can go to the 3rd slide. So how inequitable are these wages? So today, the DC minimum wage is $15 an hour. And we have found consistently that Pepco contractors pay the lowest wages. right? So all of those 6 workers on that previous slide, they were all working for a Pepco contractor. And, you know, a worker doing the same, you know, a laborer doing the same work, the same kind of, you know, scope of work on a DC water job is paid almost twice as much. And that worker has health insurance, and that worker has retirement benefit. You know, I'm sure some of you are familiar with MIT's living wage kind of calculator, right? It's a pretty conservative methodology, but according to MIT, you know, it takes about $20, you know, if you're a single person with no kids to make it in DC. We know that that's a pretty low wage, right? To really live here. If you're a single person with 1 kid like I am, you know, it's like $38, right? The median wage is about, you know, $41. Chris Crane, Exelon CEO, makes about $7,400 an hour. And, you know, an average Pepco employee makes about $61 an hour because, you know, Pepco, the in-house is really heavily geared towards, you know, lawyers and regulatory analysts, you know, so it tends to trend higher. But, you know, but it's important to just remember that it's like the people in the street, you know, who are responsible for keeping, you know, the lights on, responsible for this reliability of these functions, are being paid, you know, minimum wage. They're paid a little bit higher washing the gas because those workers are unionized, right? So 85% of that workforce is unionized, and those workers make between $20 to $40, depending on experience, and have affordable health insurance and a pension benefit. And so Pepco is really an outlier in terms of poor poverty wages for DC. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so I'm not going to read this quote, but I know that folks are going to, WePower is going to circulate the presentation afterwards. You know, at the virtual community hearing, which many of you were a part of, you know, we had some of our members and also non-union members kind of talk about their experience. And what we found is, you know, we've been engaging with the commission since about 2017. And, you know, what we found is, you know, really to get anyone's attention, you know, folks need to hear, like these commissioners need to hear from the workers themselves, right? Like what their struggles are. And, you know, this worker, she's a member of ours now. But she, at the time, you know, when she was working for a Pepco contractor, was making $14 an hour, right? Had she stayed for a year, she would have made $10,000 that year, right? No benefits. And so, you know, these are skilled jobs, but they're paid poverty wages. And so why is that, right? Like, so the answer is that, you know, oftentimes these are really vulnerable workers, right? A lot of undocumented workers, you know, in Pepco's contracted out workforce, you know, so they're scared to talk to us, right? They're scared to stand up for themselves. And so it really takes kind of collective action and, you know, and solidarity, you know, in order to stand with these workers, to elevate their, you know, concerns so that they're able to support their families and live with dignity. We can go to the last slide, please. Or the next slide. So we basically have, you know, just 2 kind of requests. You know, one, we think that, you know, no worker should be left behind, right? That if utility construction work should have standardized wages and benefits with health insurance and retirement benefits for all utility workers, right? So we have to stop that inequity and kind of standardize these wages across the board because it is the same scope of work. It is the same work. And then the last thing I'll say, and you know, we don't have enough time to kind of talk about what a just transition for fossil fuel workers looks like. But we do represent, you know, we represent pipe fitters. We represent folks in the ground, folks on the ground who are replacing natural gas pipelines, right? These are good jobs for these workers. And so, you know, the question then becomes like, what is this? How do we transition these workers equitably, right? To date, you know, there hasn't really been a just transition. And so, you know, I think that's one place, one area of common ground intersection that, you know, I'd like to, that we can explore further with allies. So that's all for me. Thank you so much for inviting us and for giving us the time to kind of share our campaign.
Thanks so much, Meva. I learned a lot, and I hope everyone else did too. Unfortunately, Maeva can't stay for the Q&A, but feel free to put any questions for her in the chat and we'll get them to her. So good utility jobs are an essential part of equitable access to clean energy and economic justice. Without investment in workers within the community to do things like install small-scale solar or implement energy efficiency projects, a just transition to clean energy future cannot be achieved. The DC government presents itself as a national leader in clean energy and energy equity issues, but so far the renewable energy revolution has overwhelmingly benefited white, wealthy DC homeowners. Existing DC programs for energy efficiency and low-income solar deployment are not nearly large enough. Only 3% of all household solar installations in the district are a result of Solar for All, the main district program to support solar installations for low-income homeowners. And much of DC solar infrastructure is in the hands of wealthier homeowners. Renters, low-income households, and people of color are being shut out of opportunities to lower their energy bills and get green jobs that further the energy transition. But structures already exist to change this. The DC Sustainable Energy Utility, DCSEU, which oversees the implementation of the district's energy affordability and efficiency programs, has already installed over 200 solar installations in single-family homes and over 13 megawatts of community solar in 2 years. It estimates that over 1,800 income-qualified homes have seen their electricity bills cut in half from this program. The DC government can expand this. The DC Green Bank, designed to provide financing to clean energy resiliency and energy efficiency projects in the district, can redirect more funds for those programs. A simple, effective way to ensure a clean energy transition benefits those who have historically been left out and who need it the most. We demand that the DC government invest significantly more in household solar installations, community solar, and electrification for renters and low-income neighborhoods. So that's it from the demands for me, but we can't shape this energy justice vision alone. We need your help. In a few moments, we will transition into breakout rooms where We Power DC organizer will walk you through a series of discussion questions about a fair and just energy system in DC. The breakout rooms will be about 5 minutes. The questions are up on the screen now, and your moderator will also post them in the chat in the breakout room. The rooms won't be recorded, but your moderators will be taking notes during the discussion to share with the full group of organizers to inform our campaign strategy. As a people-powered campaign, we really want to make sure everyone's voices are heard and incorporated into our strategy to achieve a people-centered energy system. Now enjoy the discussion and you'll get a notification when you're being pulled back into the main room.
Hello.
Hi.
I was assigned to a room with people I knew. I would love to meet new people. Would that be all right?
So
If not, I can go back. It's fine.
I can ask the moderator or our Zoom maestro.
That
Yeah,
sounds really
sure.
complicated. I'll be fine.
No. Which room were you in?
I was in 2.
You were in 2? Okay.
Thank you.
Abby, you want to just let me know when I should close them?
Yep, we'll do. Yeah, Adam, if you could close them in like a minute or so, that'd be great. All right, it looks like folks are trickling back in. We'll wait a minute or so until everyone gets back.
Hello?
Hi, yes, we're here.
Hi, yes, I just wanted to make a statement about the energy assistance. There should be a way that we should be allocating to the DC Council to submit funds to the Office of the People's Council. These organizations that constituents have to reach out to for support and help, and more. It needs to be actually funded year round and not seasonal, and like ERAP programs and stuff of that nature. But most definitely, Office of the People's Council, they should have, the council needs some type of change of policy and give them a type of budget program that they should have as well for utility assistance as well. They need funds not only just to be an advocate or lawyer to advocate for, tenants, excuse me, with their utility bills, but most definitely they need funds as well.
Thanks for that. Yeah, we are definitely taking note of all of this, and we're going to move into a call to action in a bit and tell you how to plug in. So it looks like we're still waiting for a few folks, but welcome back to those who are back, and I hope you all had great discussions. Feel free to drop some thoughts in the chat. We don't really have time to debrief verbally right now, but our moderators are taking diligent notes, and we'll definitely take note of all your ideas. And we're also, as mentioned before, having a Q&A at the end so we can talk through some of your questions and ideas in more detail. I'm really excited to hear y'all's thoughts about what a just energy system in DC looks like. But we know we can't take back power for the people without the people's support. We know that energy access is not just an issue within the boundaries of DC, and the situation in Texas has clearly illuminated the failure of energy systems that prioritize profit over people. For our guests tonight who don't live in DC, Gabby Sari-Tobar from the Center for Biological Diversity and Johanna Bazua from the Democracy Collaborative are here to tell you how to get involved on the national level. Take it away, Gabby and Johanna.
Hi, everyone. This is Gabby. I'm the Energy Justice Campaigner with the Center for Biological Diversity. And Johanna and I are both here to represent the No Shutoffs Coalition, which is a coalition of hundreds of groups who are calling for a federal shutoff moratorium on water, electric, and broadband utilities. And I'll let Johanna take it away with some actions.
Hey all, yes. So as Gabby said, yeah, we have been fighting now. We're almost, this is crazy, at a year, or this is, overwhelming that we are at a year mark of people experiencing the pandemic, and also that the not having access to some of the critical services they need, like being able to stay in their home for rent, or to be able to pay their utility bills for these basic energy services. So we have been fighting day in and day out for the past year to try to implement a federal moratorium that could at least go for the entirety of the emergency moment we have right now. So we have a moment right now that we're organizing towards. There's a bill at the federal level. We are working with Senator Merkley, and who has been a major champion of this effort since the beginning, to put forward a combination basically of debt cancellation and moratorium through it's a funky system because of how the Senate is set up right now, but we need to be able to, we are in a position where we really need to push over this next week to garner support for that amendment to get it into the actual relief package so that we can make sure that everyone has access to energy, and fight at the federal level for what you all are doing day in and day out as well at the local level. We really see ourselves as trying to support and amplify and bring the campaigns that are happening in DC and across the country to federal legislators so that we can support as we can. So that is kind of where we're at, and in terms of the legislation, and we are working really actively with our champions like Rep. Rashida Tlaib, Senator Merkley, and Senator Brown, and quite a few others. And we absolutely need your help in the pressure campaigns to do so. So Gabby, I think I'll jump it off to you in terms of how the couple of ways that people can get activated and get involved in some of the federal related stuff.
I saw a comment that my audio was a little choppy, so wondering if it's okay now. Okay, great. So yeah, a great way for everyone to get plugged in and just stay activated on the work that the coalition's doing is to join the Utility Justice Listserv. And I know that just in terms of the next few days, there'll definitely be opportunities where we'll ask for support. So it would be great to If you can shoot me an email, and I think Abby has those contacts, and just let me know if you want to join. But essentially, we're fighting for this moratorium, but also, as many on the call have already talked to, we're really fighting for institutional change and really trying to transform our energy system. So this is also just another great opportunity to get plugged in about where we're kind of jumping off of from the moratorium and just creating utility justice across the country. So thanks. And I think I'm passing it off to Michaela now.
Yeah, thanks so much, Gabby and Johanna. Now we have Michaela Wilkes, who's a community activist and a progressive Democrat running a grassroots campaign for Congress in Maryland's 5th District in 2022, a district also serviced by PEPCO. Michaela is here to speak to us about utility shutoffs and debt forgiveness in Maryland. Thanks, Michaela. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you all for allowing me to speak tonight. And it's definitely been an honor and very informative just to hear all the other speakers. So thank you. I'm here today because energy is a human right, just like healthcare, just like housing, just like education, food security, etc. No one should be going without electricity, especially right now when we're in the midst of a pandemic and everyone has to work and study from home. It's just completely unconscionable. Here in Maryland, it's been reported that Prince George's County and that PEPCO has actually began doing shutoffs in Prince George's County here in Maryland. So that's something that we're also dealing with that's very concerning. And I'm proud to be here, in solidarity with you all. This is an issue about justice, and justice is multifaceted. And in this case of justice, it's about energy justice. And in this case of justice, it's about racial justice. It's about environmental justice. Research shows us that Black households have a higher cost and energy rates than white households, even after controlling factors like income. Black people also spend a higher share of their income on energy bills and are more likely than white people to have their utilities shut off. So what we're asking for is not radical. What we're asking for isn't out there. What is radical is shutting off people's utilities, even outside of a pandemic. It is unconscionable. It is barbaric to shut off one's utilities when you need it to live. It is a human right. You need it in order to have a functioning home. It is barbaric to prey on those who are our most vulnerable, our marginalized communities, our low-income families, to prey on them for profit while these multi-billion-dollar industries, while these multi-million-dollar executives are profiting off of our pain and off of our misfortune. That's what's radical, not what we're asking for. Getting rid of utility debt is not radical. That's something that needs to be done. Permanently instituting a moratorium on utility shutoffs is not radical. It's something that needs to be done. Everything that we're asking for can be done. And we know that it can be done because it's being done now. And having public utilities is an environmental justice issue. We see what's going on in Texas. And we have these private owned companies that are administering utilities for profit. This is something that's going to become normal to us as climate change continues to progress in our country across the entire world. This is something that's not going to get better. It's only going to get worse, and it's only going to affect people like us. We see people like Ted Cruz who flew over the border to Mexico to get away from the effects of climate change. We ultimately are going to be the people that are going to be here, that are going to suffer the consequences because they failed to act. And that's one of the main reasons why I am running for Congress. My congressman is Congressman Steny Hoyer, and Exelon is one of his top contributors to his campaign financing. He refuses to support a Green New Deal or even put it on the floor for a vote to even discuss it, and which is completely also unconscionable, without even regards to public utilities, but with regards to being in the midst of a respiratory pandemic that affects our respiratory systems. And so this is not a time for silence. This is not a time for complacency. This is a time for movement. This is a time for momentum. This is a time for fight, and this is a time for solidarity. And so this is a time for all of us to stand together in community and demand until we receive, and receive. It is time for some damn change. Thank you.
Wow, thanks so much, Michaela. That was really inspiring, and we really appreciate hearing your perspective. So now I'm just going to talk a little bit about what we can do here in DC. In DC, as we've seen before, when we helped defeat an unqualified nominee for the Public Service Commission, and when we fought to extend the moratorium on utility shutoffs, when we make demands, the council listens, and we need to do that again. The DC Council has the power to enact a permanent ban on utility shutoffs. The fact that they haven't done that yet is unacceptable. We need you to write or call Council Chairman Phil Mendelson today and demand he establish a permanent ban on utility shutoffs, not just until the end of the pandemic, but beyond. His email and number, and the numbers of all the council members, but we really want you to target Phil Mendelson, are up on the screen. And we'll send out an email in the coming days with a toolkit that includes step-by-step instructions for how to contact Chairman Mendelson and a script for the call or email. The action toolkit will also include instructions on how to get involved further in our whole campaign and some actions for what you can do in Maryland. Stay tuned for further requests for action in the coming months around our other demands, canceling utility debt, good utility jobs, and clean energy for all. We have a lot of work to do, and we need your help in shaping a just energy system. Can you join us?
Okay, thanks so much, Abby. We are going to get started on questions in just a second, but I just want to say thank you to all of our amazing speakers for being here tonight. It was amazing to hear all of your perspectives on these energy justice issues. And thanks so much to all of you guys for hanging in there with us and joining us tonight to hear about these issues in the district. We can't wait to talk to our moderators, hear what you had to say in the breakout rooms. If you are feeling super inspired tonight and want to join We Power DC, you know, you have all of our contact information there up on the slide. Feel free to get in touch with us. We can be happy to plug you into the work that we're doing. Okay, so now we'll do Q&A. Okay, we'll start with Michaela. We have a question for Michaela. Are you concerned that Democrats will lose in 2022 if Biden fails to deliver on big demands like stimulus checks, higher minimum wage, and cancellation of rent and utility debt?
Yes, I do. And I don't think it just falls specifically only on Biden. We have the trifecta in Washington, D.C. right now. We control the House, we control the Senate, we control the White House. And at this point, if Democrats on either side of the aisle, whether it's in the House, whether it's in the Senate, or whether it's in the White House, that is what's going to cause Democrats to lose if we don't come through on those promises. Because you can't blame it on Mitch McConnell anymore. You can't blame it on the Republican-controlled Senate. So at this point, if they don't act boldly and progressively like how they need to for us, and if they don't maintain their promises that they've made to us, then they're each going to be vulnerable. And that's, you know, that's a warning to them to do what they need to do. Because at this point, if they don't, it's not because they can't do it, it's just because they won't.
Thank you so much. We've got one more for you if you can stick around. What is Steny Hoyer's position on forgiving utility debt and a national moratorium on shutoffs?
To my knowledge, Steny Hoyer has not came out in support of furthering a national moratorium for utility shutoffs, and I haven't heard him make a stance on forgiving utility debt at all. I can make my assumptions just based off of, you know, who he's beholden to. It's no secret, but as of now, that's all that I know.
And just one follow-up question to that then too, how can your progressive primary challenge put pressure on him to support moratoriums or forgiveness of utility debt?
Yeah, so the way that we can do that is continue to run a very good campaign, continue to have boots on the ground so that he can take us seriously, and it'll push him further to the left. You know, last cycle, there was a few areas where he was pushed to the left, specifically for like for marijuana reform, moving towards decriminalization. It should be legalized, but it's a step. But so I think that by running a strong campaign and by pushing him in that effort and making him know that his seat is not safe, and making him know that he is in jeopardy of not maintaining the power that he has, that's how we're going to push him more further to the left, and that's how we're going to get him to support us.
Thank you so much. We've got 2 questions for Shakira. So the first question is, how have DC council members responded to your demand to cancel rent?
Well, most recently, yesterday, we had a lot of members, coalition members, and one DC members, also our Right to Housing organizer, Patrick Gregor. He testified at the roundtable yesterday, and Brianne Nadeau and Janice Lewis George asked for the legislation that we are currently trying to push, that I talked about a little earlier when I gave my speech. So yeah. So those are the 2 ones. The one that we need to push the most is Anita Bonds. And that's where like the older generation comes, because she likes to hide behind her being an older Black woman. So we need the older Black and brown folks to put pressure on her to say, hey, like, you need to cancel rent. When the younger generation do it, we come off as disrespectful. But when the older generation do it, then she has to listen to us. So Anita Bonds, because she is the housing chair, she is our target, and we have to put the pressure on her because she's the one that can move the council. The council pretty much follows what she does. And right now, we haven't been able to meet with her. We've been trying, but she hasn't heard us out. So yes, definitely. So yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. And one more question for you. What are the common demands that housing justice organizers and energy justice organizers should be making of the DC Council now? Like, where can we unite and put pressure?
I think one way where we can unite and put pressure is combining, saying that is a utility and utility shut off. What is it? The utility moratorium and the cancel rent moratorium. Connecting there, saying that people shouldn't be able to pay utilities at this time. The debt need to be forgiven. PEPCO can absorb that debt, which we all agree, and that the debt needs to be forgiven for the people that can't be able to pay their homes, pay their rent to stay in their homes. There's money coming down, I think like $200 million coming down. Then I know there's going to be more money that's coming from the federal government to DC. We need to make sure that that money is going to be used for the people that need it the most, and make sure that that money is used so that people can get their rent canceled during this time. So I think those are the 2 ways that we can come together and work on that. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I have a question here for Johanna. We had a question in the chat from Greg. Are there lessons from the Texas fiasco that we can take advantage of in DC?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Wow. I mean, this is an incredibly important moment when it comes to energy justice organizing. And so I'm so proud of what We Power DC has put together, because I think it really stands out as like the type of robust campaign that needs to be put in place, and the demands that need to be brought forward in terms of like right now what we need to be doing, but also the long-term goals, because Texas showed us the flaws of a privatized, marketized, basically white supremacist system of energy. And it's not flaws really, it is foundation to how it was designed. It was designed so that certain people could profit from it, even if it meant that other people would die from it. And, you know, that is exactly what we've seen happen in Texas. We have seen deaths occur because people have been shut off from a vital service. And where those shutoffs are happening is in the lowest income areas because of histories of structural racism and disinvestment more generally. So we're just seeing compounding crises occurring. And then, you know, it's the same fossil fuel infrastructure that's failing us that got us into this situation in the first place. And so as we go on and go forward to organize towards a new energy future, we have to call out what does not work and what does not work for our communities. And that is why we are seeing, you know, Texas, we're seeing people rise up with calls and demands to action for public power, for energy justice, for distributed renewables that build wealth. And that's exactly what we've seen after the wildfires where PG&E, the utility in California, started. It's what we're seeing in New York after we saw blackouts roll through with heat from extreme climate climate impacts. So this is pervasive. It is going to continue. It's only going to get worse. And that is why the mandate is so important to organize now, and why what We Power DC is doing is so prescient to the current moment. So I really think that y'all are on the right path, and we need to support our allies in Texas, and we need to be fighting and organizing for people on the ground in the district.
Thanks, Johanna. We have one last question, and the answer to this might be brief because I think you've touched on this in your other answer, but this is for you and Gabby. Can you talk about why local public power campaigns are important for building organizing strength to make national demands? How is the work of We Power DC and others translating into the demand for a national shutoff moratorium?
Yeah, I can jump in here as well. And Gabby, please add on. I think what is key and core to these public power campaigns coming forward is that you all are socializing and normalizing the vital component that energy is a human right. And that sounds wild, but that actually isn't considered across the country to be true. And so we have been able to take the energy and power that is happening at the local level and serve it up to members of Congress and say that people on the ground want this stuff, and they are rising up, and we are here to deliver that message. So that's why I think this type of critical local work is really core and cannot be we can't just have a federal campaign. That's not how this works. We need to see the relationship between the local and federal strategies. Yeah, Gabby, I don't know if you want to jump in there with kind of additional pieces.
No, I think that's perfectly said. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Thanks for sticking around for the Q&A and for the remainder of our program. Thank you again to all of our speakers. Please don't forget to contact and bother Phil Mendelson. If you live outside of DC, you can support Johanna's campaign, Johanna and Gabby's campaign for the National Shutoffs Moratorium. We've got an action slide that we'll leave up for you guys, but I think that about does it for us tonight. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it, and great to continue organizing with you.
Appreciate y'all. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.